Welcome to the Historical Romance Sampler Podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Grant, and each week I introduce you to another amazing historical romance author. My guest reads a little sample of their work, and then we move into a free-ranging interview. If you like these episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the Historical Romance Sampler wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Now, let's get into this week's episode.
I am super excited today to be joined by Will Forrest, author, poet, and general nuisance. Will writes unusual and usually queer romance with a dash of mischief and mayhem. Will grew up on a steady diet of Douglas Adams and classic bodice rippers and has a diploma of fashion design, a degree in social theory, and a bad habit of changing careers, life goals, and continents. Currently, they live in a very warm part of Canada with 3 lovely humans and a succession of martyred houseplants. And if you're listening to this without the visuals, you might want to go check out YouTube on this one because Will has shown up in a period appropriate costume. Will, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I am excited. Before we get into the books, just briefly, since you have a degree in fashion design, did you construct this outfit yourself?
I did. It's sort of an amalgam of a few different things. The waistcoat is just a modern piece that I reconfigured, put some fancier buttons on, and took off the collar. The shirt I made from a pattern that's based on like an 18th century chemise that is all square shapes that you kind of like Jenga together. That was very interesting. And then the cravat is just a nice little piece of queeriness. A little bit of rainbows in there. But
love it.
Yes.
All right. So you are reading today from one of your historical romances, An Inconvenient Earl.
Yes.
What should we know about An Inconvenient Earl and the scene that we're going to hear?
An Inconvenient Earl is, I call it lovers to enemies to it's complicated. It's a story of an earl, presumably, who really does not want to be in a position of power. He has dyslexia, he has anxiety. None of these things are named in the book because we didn't have that language at that time, but he's basically desperately trying to get out of his responsibilities. And his daydream is that somebody like his secret lover will perhaps conveniently kidnap him and whisk him away to some magical land where he has no responsibilities and nothing bad ever happens. This obviously goes very, very badly because it's a novel. And so, yes, Ralph is essentially trying to struggle with his position in the world and not feeling like he deserves the privilege or the life that he leads, and is just, like so many of us, kind of looking for that knight in shining armor to kind of sweep him away and let him start a new life. So I'm going to read from chapter 4 and chapter 5. Ralph has just woken up with a very large hangover after going to meet his lover, and he's woken up with a hangover and is now wondering what exactly is going on because there's quite a lot of unanswered questions that he has to face right now.
Intriguing.
Yes. So with no further ado, I shall read chapter 4, A Rude Awakening. The beam of sunlight had been chasing him across the pillow for some time. Ralph turned this way and that, but there was no escaping its hot glare. Groaning at the ache, gripping his head in its iron claws, he rolled onto his back. A line had been painted on his ceiling. A hitch part way made it look like a river drawn on a large map. He gazed at its familiar contours, unable to place it, nor to account why it had been painted on his bedroom ceiling. Memories of the previous night lurked darkly in the corners of his mind. He and Adam had been happy about something, then very, very sad. They had drunk an obscene quantity of wine, and ale, and something else, its bitter taint clinging to his teeth. He sat up cautiously, waiting for the wave of nausea to recede before reaching for the bell pull to summon his man Redmond, who was going to catch an earful for having left the bedroom curtains open. Except Ralph was not at home. That was not his ceiling. He was sitting on a straw mattress on a rough-hewn bedstand in a small, dirty room, lit by the beam of sunshine falling through the bleary glass of its one narrow window. A room he knew only by candlelight, yet he recognized it like he knew his lover's face. In a word, paradise. He lay back, pulling up the prickly blanket up to his nose to breathe in his lover's scent. So the darling man had made their dreams come true. The tangle of last night's memories began to unknot. Their frantic laughter, their tears of mourning, Ralph's lover aiding him up the stairs to this very room. Though of his waking up mostly dressed was any sign, that had been the extent of their encounter, for which he was happy to make amends as soon as they were reunited. Blinking against his robust and very inconvenient headache, he rose from bed. He rinsed his mouth with the stale water in the chipped ewer, then washed his face and hands. Shivering in the morning chill, he looked about for his coat. His shoes as well were nowhere to be found, nor his purse and what jewelry he'd worn. Clearly he'd been robbed. A useless effort, for his purse had been close to empty, and the jewels mere paste. Hopefully the tavern keeper had a pair of shoes Ralph might borrow, so he might at least get home. But when he tried the door, he found it locked. Usually his lover left the key in the hole. The room contained only the bedstand, a chair, and a table, one of its legs a different color of wood, for it replaced the leg they had broken. He searched fruitlessly for the key, even feeling along the door frame for an unseen niche. Despairing of choices, he knocked on the door, tentatively, then with force. The door swung inward suddenly, and like a dream made real, his lover slipped in, closing the door behind him. He was dressed for traveling, with a heavy cape over his jacket, the sheath of a knife knotted to his wide belt. "I'm so glad to see you," Ralph said. "They've taken everything." He gestured helplessly at his stockinged feet, the barren room. "And you, were you robbed as well?" His lover shook his head. He hadn't moved from the doorway, but as Ralph moved towards him, he stiffened. "What's wrong?" Ralph asked, stopping his advance. "Other than my having been robbed." His expression stark, the man tossed a cloth bag onto the gritty floorboards between them. "Put that on. We need to leave at once." The bag contained Ralph's shoes and coat and a similar cloak. "Where are we going?" he asked as he knelt to close his buckles. Feeling about under the mattress, his lover didn't reply. Very well, if he wished to play the role of villainous abductor to the hilt. And without further word, Ralph followed him out of the room, down the stairs, and out the back door. After close to an hour of walking, they left the southbound road and started moving through the woods. Though the undulating terrain resembled the land around Godden Hall, between their curving route around the rising hills and the clouds that had obscured the morning sky, Ralph soon lost sense of their direction. He guessed it to be midday when they stopped at the bend of a swiftly running creek. His shoes were beginning to chafe, as they were made for city streets, at most the occasional stable, and not for tromping over hills. He sat on a flattish rock by the water to remove them. "As much as I enjoy surprises, it might be time to tell me where we're going," he said as he attempted to rub some feeling into his toes. "I promise our secrets are safe with me." "Don't say such things," the other man gritted, his teeth bared. "But my darling," his lover silenced him with a snarl and sharply raised hand, as though Ralph were an errant dog in want of a whipping. "Don't ever call me that again. Whatever we had, whatever was between us, it dies today." "I don't understand." With a shudder of unspeakable revulsion, the man drew his knife from its sheath. "Does this make things clearer?" "Be serious, friend." "I am entirely serious, and I am not your friend." His face a mask of hatred, he stepped towards Ralph, the hand-length blade gleaming dully in the gray light. "Look, this is entirely unnecessary. I'm sorry those jewels of mine aren't worth anything. I never wear the good stuff when I come down here." Ralph was babbling, but the blade was very long, and the creek was very near, and he was already on his knees and short of options. "But I assure you, I am very, very wealthy. I can get you whatever you want." "You are in no position to bargain." "Perhaps you don't realize just how wealthy I am." "I have a very good idea, your lordship," his former lover, sneered, his lovely features contorted with disgust. "I know exactly who you are, and I know what you're worth, and all of that won't be enough to buy your way free of me." "Are you certain? Because it really is a considerable amount, and—" "Shut up!" He lunged forward, bringing the knife to within an inch of Ralph's chin. "One little prick for me and your life ends. I'll leave you to bleed to death all alone in this cursed forest." "What is it you want? For you to do what you're told. Do I not deserve to know? You don't deserve a damned thing. Now, are you going to behave yourself, or am I going to leave you here to die?" Of course, because nothing Ralph desired could ever become his. No wanting, no heart-searing need had ever been enough to earn him the slightest shred of happiness. As his captor's knife retreated, he felt a single burning impulse to grab the man's hand, force an end to these endless losses. To do so was to give the victory to his enemies. He wanted to watch them burn. They walked for several hours more, up and down ever taller hills and along the stony valleys between. This late in the year, the trees had lost most of their leaves, their branches twining blackly against the sky's featureless smear of watery gray. As it grew darker, their progress slowed, until they seemed to be creeping through a twilit underworld, a purgatorial realm without destination or purpose. At last they descended a treacherous slope to the gorse-clogged valley floor, where they halted beside a hulking mound of stones, which proved to be the ruins of a small house. The thatch was missing from one end of the roof, the other end so rotted a small tree had sprouted beside the canting chimney. A corner of the single interior room had been used as a privy by its prior occupants, as well as an assortment of animal life. The man steered Ralph to a pile of juniper boughs and punked straw, which lay against the other wall. Put your hands behind your back. If you intend to kill me, can you please do it very quickly? Ralph said as he complied. That's an invitation to make it take longer. Oh, please don't make it take longer. I'm not going to hurt you, his captor replied sharply. I'm going to sleep, and you are going to stay absolutely still and silent while I do so. Is it really necessary to... Ow! Tie me so tightly? I won't run away, I promise. A promise is just words. I have no reason to trust you. Whereas I can't trust anyone but you. The man paused, and Ralph hurried on. Think of it from my perspective. I'm already incapacitated. He flexed his bound hands, the coarse rope pricking his skin. I don't have the slightest idea where we are. Anyone wandering about the woods in the middle of the night is unlikely to be the sort of person whose attention I wish to attract. They're as likely to kill you, bugger me, and rob us both blind as they are to offer me aid. I can't get much more helpless. He waited, the other man's ragged breath hot against his neck. You make a sound, the man grated, and I'll be making sure tomorrow's the worst day of your life. Pinching his lips closed, Ralph nodded, and then he was falling, his legs buckling under him as his captor prodded his knees into the back of Ralph's. The man heaved him onto his side, facing the wall of damp, chalky plaster. His shoulders were already beginning to ache. His feet were rubbed raw in countless places, the sole of one of his shoes starting to come away from the toe. He was very cold, the thin cloak offering scant protection against the damp air. None of these discomforts matched the agony within his heart. 2 days ago, everything had been as it should be. 2 days ago, he'd had a father and a lover and a future, or at the very least a vision of the future he desired. Now he had nothing at all, and it wasn't nearly as liberating as he'd dreamed. Don't speak, don't blub, don't make things worse. Don't let him know how much you hurt. Luckily, he had a lifetime of practice at shedding silent tears. Chapter 5, Knives and Spoons. I'll mention here, they've been lying to each other the whole time they've known each other. They don't actually know each other's name at all. So I will now be changing names, but it's still Ralph and Ryan are the same person. But Harry doesn't know that yet. So Chapter 5, Knives and Spoons. As Ryan lay softly weeping, Harry walked away, out of the ruined cottage and into the black night. A dozen paces into the woods, he crouched, hugging his knees to his chest and biting his kneecaps to keep from screaming his frustration. This wasn't a bothersome task, this was torture, a deliberate and malicious punishment. The death of Harry's partner and friend not payment enough for their having disappointed one of Fisher's clever little gambits. He hated every part of this, hated that he was here in these wet, cold ruins in charge of a weeping earl, and not in that snug room over the watchmaker's shop, eating toasted cheese and drinking Bixby's cherry wine and planning their next take. What he might have been doing with the weeping man whose life he was presently ruining was too near to contemplate. Dreams of what it could have been, lost to him forever. He compelled himself to his feet. Exhaustion hung around his neck like iron chains, chains forged of 2 weeks of restless vigilance, the long night minding Ryan while he slept off his foul friend's drug, and the subsequent hours of travel on a deliberately indirect route Harry had plotted to confound both his captive and any pursuit. Ryan hadn't stirred and made no sound as Harry lowered himself onto the musty pallet beside him, lying back to back and keeping to the very edge. Having long ago broken through every boundary of physical intimacy with the other man, touching him bore no significance, yet Harry felt he was sharing a bed with a tiger, or a smoldering keg of powder, something seething with danger. At length he slept, lulled by Ryan's steady breath and the rhythmic tap of rain dripping from a broken rafter onto stone. When he woke, it was still dark. Ryan lay, as he had all night, on his side facing the dirty wall, his hands bound behind him. His hands. In the coldest hour of the night, Harry must have rolled over, for he was curled around Ryan, whose cupped hands neatly cradled Harry's balls. Stiff with the morning urgency, Harry's cock lay hard against Ryan's back. If either of them so much as sneezed... With excruciating slowness, he lifted his arm from around Ryan's waist, shifted his pose in minute adjustments until his cods were free of the newly minted Earl's slumbering grasp. Harry's cloak was snagged on a juniper branch protruding from beneath the heaped straw, and he lost several more minutes to unhooking it without jostling the other man or cursing aloud. By the time he got outside, the cold air had done its duty, and his relief was swiftly obtained. It was a narrow life that could be measured by such base pleasures, the satisfying of one's gross physical needs. He returned to find Ryan struggling to rise. Feeling a pang of mercy, or possibly guilt, Harry unbound his hands and helped him to his feet. "We've still a ways to go," he said. "We need to start." His eyes unfocused, head heavy. Ryan merely nodded, then followed Harry out of the tumble-down cottage. His lordship had clearly taken to heart Harry's threat, for he said nothing as they picked their way along the pathless hillsides. Harry had been making use of the Margates' estate for longer than he'd been a thief, and knew its contours as though the land was his own. The route marked in his memory is a series of places. This bend of the creek, that storm-felled tree. Yet today, every step dragged at his feet, the gray light and damp air sapping his vigor and meddling with his eyes. Looking behind to be sure his captive was keeping pace, he caught a flicker of movement between the distant trees. A bird, a small animal, nothing of menace. Still, he could not help from looking back, pausing again and again to survey the empty forest as the cold morning became indifferent noon. At the summit of the next ridge, he stopped to sight down the valley before them. As at every halt, Ryan stood motionless, his head bowed, hands limp at his sides. He had fallen twice, and muddy leaves clung to his stockings and cloak. As Harry gazed out across the valley in search of a reliable landmark, Ryan resumed his shuffling gait, brushing past Harry to start down the hill. "Where are you going?" Harry called. Ryan stopped and slowly turned to him with a questioning expression. He glanced down the valley, then back at Harry. Then with a sigh began to climb back up. Behind him on the valley floor stood a stone-walled cottage, its peaked thatch roof hidden by a grove of saplings. Abandoned long before Harry had found it, the cottage was of the same construction as the hovel they sheltered in last night, built of local stone, daubed with chalky clay soil. Over the years of his quiet use, he had repaired the walls with stones scavenged from the ruin and replaced much of the thatch. It had proved a snug, if confining den in which to spend the previous winter, licking his wounds both bodily and spiritual. 2 miles from any road, and all but invisible unless one was standing nearly on top of it, he had known of no better place to store an inconvenient Earl for a fortnight. Harry had never come at it from this approach. His face heating, he waved Ryan to turn him out. "Never mind, you're headed the right way. And when I said you had to be quiet, I didn't mean for the rest of your life." On the hillside below, Ryan stopped yet again. He turned slowly to face Harry. Twigs sticking to his cloak and mud on his hands, tendrils of his black hair clinging damply to his brow like the stark black branches of the leafless trees stretching across the colorless sky, he nonetheless stood resolutely, at last looking the part of a son of privilege, a peer of the realm, untouched by any law but his own. "Is that so?" he said, his eyes glinting with a cold fire. "Then please allow me to express my thoughts of the last several hours, starting with, you can suck a rotten lemon, you hack-handed, rat-licking, deceitful, donkey-brained..." He broke off with a shudder of contempt before going on bitterly. "I trusted you. I cared for you. And you tossed that caring out the window and into the gutter like a turd, and I will never, ever forgive you. And for mugging's mercy's sake, you aren't even any good at this." He gestured angrily at the cottage in the valley below. "Your victim shouldn't be able to find your secretive hideout at a single glance." Staggered by the pointed tirade, Harry snatched the first defense to hand. "You only found it because I brought you here. I found it because I was looking in the direction it happened to lay. You'll note the absence from our environs of any other person who might see it. Perhaps because all there is to see in these mugging environments is this mugging hill. God Christ, why am I arguing with you? Just get your ass down the fucking hill, and keep your voice down or I won't hesitate to gag you." The Earl had already resumed his hobbling descent and gave no reply. Feeling like his head had been turned inside out, Harry followed.
Ooh. Captivating scene on 2 different levels of captivating. I've got lots to talk to you about, but first we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. Hey, audiobook listeners. Have you checked out the official Historical Romance Sampler Season 1 playlist on Libro.fm? On the playlist, you'll find historical romances you heard here first that are available to listen to on Libro.fm. Plus, if you're not yet a Libro.fm subscriber, use code HISTORICAL to get extra credits in your first month. Head on over to the Historical Romance Sampler Linktree to learn more. I am back with Will Forrest, who just read a sample from An Inconvenient Earl. And I have just been looking at my notes trying to figure out which direction I want to go. My first question is, you write so many different types of romances. If anyone goes to your website, they'll see that you write paranormal, you write like 20th century, you write Victorian, you write all sorts of romances. And in this scene, we're getting so many themes about like, what does a person deserve, dreams versus reality. I'm curious, what about this story told you to write it as a historical romance?
It was more the idea of like, if I wanted to write a Regency, what would it be like? And like, what do I like about the Regency era stories that are written from them? I'm not so much into like ballroom drama. Like I'm not really into like, gossip in court and that kind of social drama. I like a little bit more kind of adventure in my stories. So like the kidnapping the heir is such a trope in Regency, like either the girl or the man gets, whisked away and has to kind of cope with being out of their normal milieu. Because yeah, that's just what more interests me more about that kind of era is the kind of adventures that you could have in it.
So, what made you say, oh, I want to write a Regency book? Were you reading a lot of Regencies? Has it always been on your bucket list?
I mean, I don't really know if there is any particular like, oh, I have to like it was ticking the box. There was sort of a bit of a trend going on for a bit where like a lot of big historical romance writers were doing queer Regency stuff, like Alexis Hall put out a few, KJ Charles, and I'm just like, okay, well now this is a sandbox that I can play in now. Most of the things I'd written before that were Victorian era, but within that I'd written like a Regency's short story and kind of had fun with the wording and the pacing. And like I try and write in a very historical idiom and a very historical writer's voice. So I just wanted to kind of play around in that.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's something that you get from writing Regency that's different from even Victorian, which is kind of like they're kind of, we kind of group them
Yeah.
all together a lot.
Well, no, I mean, I think Regency is interesting. I mean, it's almost more coherent with like our current times because it was a very politically chaotic time. There's revolutions happening all over the place. Social rules were being shattered. Kings were losing their heads. It is a very kind of like dynamic time. And like, not to say that there were not political events that occurred in the Victorian and other periods, but it's just a very, it's an interesting period for everyone to write about because it has so much going on in it. And the conflicts can be quite, you know, live or die kind of situations.
Yeah, and there's such a wealth difference too that I think we
Yeah.
see resonating.
And I really leaned into that because the one character in this book, Harry, I mean, he came up from poverty. He's never really he had like a taste of middle class life, but that was sort of stripped away from him. And he's been living by his wits as a thief since he was like a teenager, since he was about 15. And so for him to have even had a relationship with Ralph, the Earl, or the Earl to be, was itself a kind of conflicting relationship, to be stepping so far out of both of their comfort zones. Like they're not supposed to know each other in any social context whatsoever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I noticed that your chapters have titles, and I always kind of play around with that idea because when you're formatting an ebook, for people who've never formatted an ebook, the software is like, do you want to have a title for this chapter? And I'm always just like, chapter one, chapter two. And I'm always like, oh, but it'd be fun to have chapter names, but then I don't do it. What is your relationship to chapter titles? And do you spend a lot of time thinking about it? And what do you think about it?
I mean, I kind of started using them just to help me in writing, so that when I was scrolling through the manuscript, like a chapter 2, chapter 3, like that doesn't mean anything. Like knives and spoons, oh, that's the one where they spoon and then he pulls the knife. right? So it started as just a way for me to kind of keep track of where I was in the story, but then there a chance to sort of tease the theme that you're going to lean into. In that I like to use them for puns and like little inside jokes. And like there's
Yeah.
always that kind of like, I like giving the reader that kind of like, oh, I'm so clever feeling when you come across the chapter title or the book title in the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a little extra
I love that.
there.
So in your bio, you mentioned that, you read a lot of Douglas Adams and classic bodice rippers. Do you see similarity between sci-fi and romance when you read it? And then second part of the question, do you see sci-fi genre conventions showing up in your writing when you're just writing romance?
Well, I would first say that my main association with Douglas Adams is not as sci-fi, it's as humor.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yes, okay, it happens in space, but like what really has always engaged me with his work is just the comedy and the way he builds his sentences and the way the fish out of water characters interact with the like super ridiculously confident characters, but who are also kind of not competent. That was always my joy. I liked seeing people kind of struggle just with the strangeness of settings. So, I mean, in a sense, as a reader, particularly if you're reading like historical, anytime you're reading like anything that's not straight contemporary, I find that you are being asked to kind of inhabit this new kind of world and a new kind of setting. But then you get there and you find out that the problems are just human problems and the same human problems we've always had, like how to get along with people you don't like, how to tell people that you like them, how to balance all these different needs and not lose yourself in the process, or after you've lost yourself, how to find yourself again. Something I always liked in the Hitchhiker's Guide series, if you read it all the way to the end, is that Arthur Dent does actually get his shit together eventually. Like he's not constantly just terrified and bumbling the whole time. By the fourth book, he actually has learned enough about this world that he found himself in that he can go back to just being a human. He doesn't constantly have to be learning things.
That's a really great articulation of why fiction is fiction. Okay, I also read online that you've read a lot of Sweet Valley High. So,
Yeah.
which Sweet Valley High twin did you identify most with as a kid?
Oh, definitely the bad one.
Okay,
Oh
Jessica.
yeah. Oh yeah. Like Elizabeth's nice, but yeah, she's my girl.
Nice.
No, I'm not into like the gossipiness and the cattiness, but just like the kind of like freedom. And I'm like, you know what? Just be yourself. If other people don't like it, that's their loss. Like she was always very confident, very like, nope, I'm gonna go do this thing. And Elizabeth's like, well, I don't think about it. But then also like, she also makes mistakes constantly, like, but then finds a way to kind of resolve it by the end. And I'm like, that kind of felt at home to me because yeah, I kind of bumble through life and have made some bad choices, but luckily I've had people around me who are willing to, forgive me and let me back in. So yeah, I'm the evil twin for sure.
I love that. All right, well, it's time to play Love It or Leave It.
Okay.
Do you love it or leave it? Protagonists meet in the first 10% of the story.
You usually love it because then they have to fight it out. They don't have to like each other, but I like it when they meet each other early.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Although on one of my biggest series that I'm working on right now, they don't meet until like the halfway point of the book.
Ooh, all right. Love it or leave it, dual point of view narration.
Ooh, I'm book to book. Like
Mm.
this, Inconvenient Earl is dual narration because I really wanted to show like Harry's struggle as well. But I also sometimes like it when you have only the one person's perspective and you're kind of left in the dark as to why the other person's acting the way they do. Like there's a lot more kind of, well, it's just a different approach, right? It just gives you different insight into what the characters are going through. And like sometimes one character is just more compelling. And if like I want to write the other POV, I have to write an entire second book.
Right.
Fill in all the information. So
Yeah.
I'm very much book to book.
Okay. Do you love it or leave it? Third person past tense.
Again, yeah, I usually write in that, but when I write contemporary, I tend to write first person present.
Mm.
Like I've got a contemporary series, Why Choose series that I'm just finishing right now, and it felt, I mean, contemporary and present tense sort of seem to go together a lot in romance. So I kind of wanted to, sort of follow the convention and also challenge myself to write that way because I don't
Mhm.
usually. It was really the first time that I'd done that, but it works really well for the story.
Yeah.
It's been, I think contemporary tends to dwell a little bit more on people's interiority, like they're sitting and thinking through things that's happening to them. Whereas I have such an association with sort of classic fiction with historical romance that I tend to prefer that being third person past because it just feels more natural to the genre, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Makes
But yeah,
sense.
the more contemporary I write, the more I tend to prefer the first person immediacy.
Mm. All right. Do you love it or leave it? The third act dark moment.
Ooh, yes. Yeah, I like because that's a chance to kind of push the characters to their limits. Everything's working really well, but there's still like 150 pages, and you're like, oh God, you're gonna make me work for this, aren't you? And it doesn't always have to be a breakup. Sometimes it's just like the antagonist will suddenly make their move, or something will happen to disrupt the sort of orderly flow of everything's going really well now. And I'm like, well, life doesn't do that. Life tends to throw you curveballs constantly. So I do like that little kind of like, oh, if this wasn't romance, this would not work out well. Oh no.
All right. And do you love it or leave it? Always end stories with an epilogue.
I will leave it. I like it if you can get it all in one. I'm not opposed to an epilogue, but I don't think it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Some, it depends how the story ends. Sometimes it ends really abruptly, and then that there's a cooling off period where literally nothing happens and it's not very interesting. So if you get the 6 months on, you kind of end up kind of seeing everything come to a resolution. But sometimes everything wraps up within the story.
All right. Do you love it or leave it? Always share research in your author's note.
Oh, I'm very lazy with that. If it's important, I will. I released a mid-century book earlier this year, and it had a lot to do with censorship issues in the 1950s. So I wanted to add some kind of factual information in the back to show where my story sat in relation to the events in real life.
Mm. Yeah,
But
that's
it's not
great.
always necessary. I didn't do a lot of research for An Inconvenient Earl. I just kind of relied on sort of generic information about the Regency. There's no historical elements, like no real history in there. It's just a context, right? But author was very much drawing on real historical events around the court cases for Fanny Hill and Tropic of Cancer, and the books that kind of broke open the literary scene and made it allowable to put, quote unquote, obscene material in literature.
Mm.
So
Okay,
that
well,
I felt like that needed some context.
I'm gonna go read that,
Yeah.
both the book and the author's note. Are there any other rules I didn't ask about, romance rules, that you like to break?
My philosophy on romance is that literally the only thing you have to do is have the happy ending for the main couple. Like I tell this to people who are kind of like, I don't know, is it a romance? I'm like, are the couple together at the end? Yes. Okay, fine. Everybody else in the book can die. Like not the pets, but it's you can have a dark romance where both the characters are like evil, but they're perfect together, right?
Hmm.
And they can go and do heinous things all over the place, but as long as their relationship is the core and they see it through and then they're together at the end and happy together, then I'm satisfied. But other than that, like gloves off, do what you like. Do
Nice.
anything.
I love it. Well, Will, thank you so much for coming on. Where can listeners find you and your books?
Yeah, I have a direct sales store now on my website. So you can buy all of my ebooks directly from me. I don't sell paperbacks there because I in Canada and the shipping is just I don't want to make people do that. It's cheaper for you to just buy it from Amazon. It's fine. It's fine. I don't want you to pay $20 to ship one book. But yeah, all of my ebooks are available on my website, and it's just willforrest.com, Forrest with 2 R's. But yeah, my site's on there. You can sign up to my newsletter on there, which comes about once a month. And yeah, it's sort of the hub for all things Will Forrest.
Love it. I'm going to put that link in the show notes so listeners, you can just click right through.
Great.
Thank you so much. This has been terrific.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Historical Romance Sampler wherever you listen, and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Until next week, happy reading!